Welcome to the Digital Culture Podcast, a podcast for people working in the creative and cultural sector and want to know more about digital. I'm your host, James Akers. Hello again. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Digital Culture Podcast. We're continuing to interview winners of the Digital Culture Awards over the next few episodes and releasing them weekly. I'm James, one of the tech champions at the Digital Culture Network. I'm a white man with brown hair and I'm wearing a grey t-shirt. There were two winners of the digital inclusion category. I interviewed Extant in the last episode, and both were chosen by Tom Riles, a cultural consultant, strategist and writer. To talk about the other winning project, my guests today are Flo and Amy from Zuko.
Hi, I'm Flo. I'm a white woman in my early 30s. I've got a bob and a fringe and I'm wearing a spotty shirt and I've got paintings behind me.
And I'm Amy. I'm a white woman in my early 40s. I've got short, light brown hair and I am in a messy family kitchen in a flat in the mighty borough of Croydon.
So you won this award for a show called The Perfect Show for Rachel. Can you tell me who Rachel is and what made this project unique?
Yes, so Rachel is my older sister. She's learning disabled and she lives in a care home. And I've grown up making shows with Rachel in the audience. She's the reason that we originally made all of our shows relaxed as standard, because she would come and heckle us whether we said it was a relaxed show or not. And we soon realised that the shows where we told audiences that it was relaxed as standard were better. They felt more electric and alive and more like a conversation with the audience, and they had a crackle of electricity in them that we wanted in all of our shows, because we try to make theatre that is inherently aware of itself being very live, and an audience is part of that. And we always say, if you want the audience to not respond to your work in a way that might affect change on stage, make a film instead. So Perfect Show for Rachel came about because I've grown up with a whole big identity of being a kind of sibling carer to Rachel, and I was pretty sure I didn't want to make a show about that. There's quite a lot of us who work in the arts. Unsurprisingly, we're all desperately starved of the attention, I guess, and need to get it back. And I didn't really want to make a show about my experience. I wanted to make one with Rachel because she loves theatre. She is extremely funny, enigmatic, loving, warm, dry. And I had mentorship from Lee Simpson, who's the co-artistic director of Improbable. And I knew that if I was making something with Rachel, a scripted piece was not going to meet her in terms of communication style. She's got no interest in learning her lines. So improvisation was going to be a massive part of anything that works with Rachel so that she could be herself. And we took that into an R&D room, this idea of making a show with, for, about Rachel. And very quickly it became clear that she wanted to steal my job as a director. I'm actually in this show as myself, as Rachel's sister, and Rachel is the director. And every night she sits on stage and she directs the show live, and it is different every night because we've built her a desk that looks like she's going to launch a shuttle into space of about 50 buttons, and each one triggers something different, and it genuinely controls the lighting, the video, the sound, the music, and what the cast do. And each one is something different, like a scene, a story, or a song, or a game that Rachel likes and wants us to show the audience. Sometimes she repeats buttons again and again. Sometimes she doesn't press any buttons at all, and it's all the stuff that happens live around that as well. The company is used to being both in the mode of performing the button that Rachel has demanded of us, and also being with her in a present way when she's not asking us to hit a button. And it's about what happens when we step into Rachel's world rather than asking her to step into ours, and really redefining what our idea of perfect means and who gets to say what perfect is. Something that really rings true for me is that Lee said, in a sort of ableist way that we're all a bit inherently guilty of, assume that Rachel would come as the subject and I would come as the theatre maker who knew how to make good theatre. And Lee quickly course corrected that very early on and said, what if everything Rachel wants us to do is already perfect and we're just too stupid to understand it yet? And from that premise, from assuming that Rachel's words are poetry, that Rachel's decisions are dramaturgy, and that what she gives us is direction, then our job is to work on ourselves, being able to receive that and translate it and interpret it and trust it. And what I have found out is that she is an incredible poet and dramaturg and director, and I've learned things from her. And I don't mean that in the cheesy, obvious way. It is hard, and I'm someone who's grown up around disability, but it is hard to rewire your system and judgment and internal assumptions about what a learning disabled person might bring to a process. And Rachel is specifically good at that. So I'm not saying every learning disabled person is a live director in the making, but Rachel happens to be. And we treated her with that respect, maybe and then let ourselves catch up with that assumption throughout the process. The wacky show, the buttons include drag queen Kylie Minogue, pub brawls that my mum ends up being part of, a dirty dancing scene,
Whoopee cushions,
Stormzy,
choosing snacks.
fart jokes. It's got scenes from Rachel's life and videos from her care home resident friends and jokes that no one else would understand except her and her mates. And they're all presented as if they might be high art and treated with that kind of effect. And she has a cast of 13 of us, including a live scribe who types every word she says as if it's poetry. And that gets shared on TV screens on the set. There's a camera on her so the audience can see her face. And she has a BSL interpreter in the company. There's a deaf performer. She has a live band. She has people who've done West End shows and choreographers and all of this incredible crew of people. And yeah, there's 13 of us on stage making that show happen. So it's also unapologetically inconvenient and big and bold.
It sounds absolutely incredible. And I can't imagine any show or any 5 minutes is ever the same.
You might not say that on press night when she's hit the same button 4 times in a row. There's sort of a safety in it because we really warmly invite the audience to experience the show however they want to. We tell them quite strictly that the show is not for them, it's for Rachel. But we tell them it will be different every time and that we will strictly adhere to what Rachel says. So there's all this possibility of the infinite things she might say, but also this warm welcome into that world. And I think actually we find that neurodivergent audiences, people who are what I would call one of my lot, quite like coming back for both the buzz of that and the familiarity of it, which has been really lovely. I think that makes it feel like it reaches audiences who really appreciate it in its kind of quirky difference.
It's interesting in terms of audiences because we get repeat bookers who want to collect more buttons. So they come back because they want to see a different version of the show. Good on Rachel for forming a fantastic sort of marketing plan, really, because a lot of our ticket sales are repeat bookers coming back to see it again.
Sounds brilliant. Can't really want to go now. So the console with all the buttons on, was that the digital element that's opened up new things for you?
Yeah, it was a long process, and I don't want to tell you it was easy to get to that bit. And it's not this one genius fix moment. When we did those initial 3 days with Rachel, we really held true to this idea that A, Rachel might not want to make a show with us at all, and B, she might want to tell her story, but she might want to tell it as a podcast or a gallery exhibition or in some way that we might not be the right artist for, or we might have to learn how to rethink our own processes for. And I think I knew that it would be theatre because Rachel loves the theatre so much. But that open-mindedness meant that we were willing to really play with what does directing look like when it's someone who's learning disabled and when it's Rachel. What does making a show look like? What does producing look like? What does schedules look like when you've got a disabled person who also has horse riding on a Tuesday?
You guys used iPads a lot before the desk was developed. You used buttons on iPads.
Yeah, in these first 3 days, what we realised was that verbal communication wasn't the only form for Rachel to truly be able to affect change. She could hold maybe 4 or 5 options in her head, but on a processing level, we were going to need to be able to give her reminders like a menu, but one that she had control over. So the next time we came back into development, and this is maybe a year and a half after that initial R&D of just going, should we make this? We brought in literally every screen we could find in terms of iPads and Apple devices, and a guy called Tim Kelly, who's a fantastic technician and sort of innovator around accessible tech, developed an iPad app for Rachel where we could put photographs onto iPads that could become buttons to trigger different things. And the reason that we didn't carry on down the iPad track was that even with all of the accessibility settings that actually are built into iPads, Rachel would press a button with one finger and then she'd roll her hand and press it a few more times, and she'd get a bit frustrated because the technology didn't speak back to her physically. So then enter the final rendition of How Does Rachel Lead? And it's become this big desk that looks like something out of The Simpsons, and each one has a gigantic photograph stuck within it. And it's these big clickable buttons, like a do not touch button in a cartoon. It's really clear that she is pressing that and unpressing it. And I think audiences, especially people who are familiar with how tech works, assume it's a prop. And we go, no, it is literally cabled into the QLab file. When Rachel hits go, when we're in tech, Rachel has to hit go from her desk in order to trigger the cues. And I think inside the desk, my layman's understanding of it is that we exploded out a computer keyboard. So each button is representative of the letter Q, the letter W, the letter E, the letter R, so that it can then speak into the QLab file as a hotkey and trigger everything that the QLab fires. So that's the major bit of tech in the show. But I would also say there's some other bits of innovation where we went, oh, Rachel talks a lot in this show and her voice is not super clear, and we have a deaf performer and deaf audiences in the cast. How do we make sure that her words don't feel like they're adjacent to the show, that they are part of it? And that turned into having a live scribe on stage, and we interview people based on their incredible typing skills. We tour with a guy called Austin Yang, and he's an incredible captioner, but he also happens to be a fantastic singer. So he has a button where he surprisingly arrives on stage and sings a song to Rachel, a big ballad to Rachel. Yeah, everyone in the show is built in to the production. So tech has been used in a few different ways, but I'd say the big crunch point for us, we just took the show to Denmark, our first international gig, Rachel's first time on an airplane. So quite a big deal for us. And some bug was in the system. There's basically a 3-chain system, and in the middle of it was some kind of bug. And the production manager was really struggling to work out, how do I make this work for tomorrow? And one of the solutions came up of maybe a stage manager could stand behind her and call what button that she's pressing. And we came to this thing of, no, the desk has to work because it's a dramaturgically and politically meaningful part of this show's mechanism. If someone stands behind Rachel going, she's pressing the Kylie Minogue button, there's another person who is controlling her decision making and she can't change her mind quickly. And there's something about the complete directness between Rachel, the technology, and the leadership of the show that we were unwilling to be flexible with, where we are often willing to do unique and creative problem solving. And the production manager actually, who was stepping in for our usual PM who's unwell, said, I've actually not worked on a show where a tech problem has been so inherent to the dramaturgy and politic of the piece. And that's really meaningful to me that I solved that problem, because we did fix it, that we were able to solve that problem that was at the heart of the show, not just a nice add-on at the side of it.
There's a great reel on our Instagram, which is Rachel Sampley, who's our AV and lighting designer, describing that process. I love seeing the disability politic buy-in from everybody who works on the show. It isn't just actors or directors who are holding that politic, it's everyone who's involved. And you can hear when Rachel's interviewed how other Rachel, how passionate she is about the directness of the desk and how it has to be Rachel's choice.
That dramaturgy came from Rachel Sampley because I didn't have the imagination or the tech understanding to know that Rachel could actually control the show. And she said, no, I think this is critical. I think Rachel knows when it's fake, and I think the audience will pick up if it's fake. And I'm so grateful. We've had to recommission a second version of the desk so that one can be on tour in one place and one can be in rehearsals in another place. So it's not without having to really justify it, but it's a completely justifiable and integral bit of tech in the show. It's also one that we've learnt from. It is influencing the work we do in much more grassroots environments. So we do a version of Perfect Show for Rachel as a workshop model with other learning disabled people being guest directors. And we do that in care homes and learning disabled education settings. And we take a tourable version of the buttons that we can voice record into so that when a director is about to direct their piece, it doesn't matter if they're a verbal communicator, as long as they have the understanding and the dexterity to push buttons, they can use the same technology as Rachel. And we actually know that a youth theatre who came to watch Perfect Show for Rachel in the first run ended up implementing that for one of their least engaged participant members in their drama workshop settings in order to offer a different way to be in charge. Because the thing is that right now in a traditional model where we're not using tech in that way, where actually communication devices and accessible technology in other fields and care settings is really advanced. In theatre, we go, if the director can't sit with a handwritten notepad and regurgitate their notes perfectly after every show, they're not a director. And I think this show has really made the burden be on us to translate what direction can be and make sure that Rachel can actually really be in charge of what the show is in every moment of it, which is exciting.
And was it always the plan to have Rachel on stage?
I thought she would be in the audience in the front row. I used to have this big red chair in my living room that she used to come and sit on, a real diva, and she'd make me perform for her. So no, but then it became really apparent that she should be. And in earlier stages of the show, when we first opened it, Rachel's agency and autonomy is built in. And so she is paid, but if she decides not to come, she can't sign a contract and know what that means. She can't make that kind of agreement and it be ethical. So we've always said Rachel has a right to not be there. If she says, no, I want to go to McDonald's, that's what happens. And we won't resist that or force her because that's incredibly important to the politic of the show. But we did have to work out what would we do if Rachel didn't come. And we have done 30 shows now and she's never not come. But the plan used to be that we'd get an audience member to come and sit with a headset and exactly replicate the button presses that Rachel had done in a previous show. what we've realised now is that she started to talk more and direct verbally as well as using the desk, which means that someone would find it really hard to understudy Rachel, especially an audience member. So now there's a different iteration of the show that happens if she doesn't come. But so far, it's more that we have to persuade her to leave the stage rather than come onto it. She loves it very much.
It sounds like you've gone through a really creative process to find solutions to the way that you want to deliver this. Were there any moments where in the use of digital, you were really surprised in some ways that works better than you thought it would, or connected with the audiences in a new way?
I think I would say that it was the audience feedback that led us to the workshop model for Perfect Worlds, which is our set of workshops. So audiences speaking to us or writing down on feedback forms, it's the kind of show that people have a lot to say about. The way the cast finish at the end of the show, they don't leave the stage because as the audience leave, they want to have a chat about it. They want to tell us what they thought. So when they were speaking to us or writing on feedback forms, they talked about wanting to make a perfect show for someone in their life. And that's what led to the Perfect Worlds workshops that we're currently running. Flo and her team visit a care setting, making a learning disabled resident a director for the day, spending the morning learning about their life, learning about things that have happened to them in their life or things that they love or things that are on their mind at the moment. And then the afternoon creating some buttons reflect their experiences and having them direct a short piece. So I think it's definitely fed into a way of widening out the show model into a workshop model that more people can experience. I think also the social media reach. We've been at the Barbican for 2 runs, one in 2022 and one in 2024. And their social media heft is just beyond anything that we could achieve on our own. Flo had this idea of creating like the movie Mean Girls, and where they're describing Regina George. Flo went, what if Rachel was positioned as Regina George and the cast members are going, Trump didn't look at me for an entire week. It was awesome. And that was explosive on social media for us. For a start, it's really funny and it stands alone. But with the Barbican's social media reach, we would put 500,000 impressions for that. And for us, that's beyond anything that we could achieve on our own.
There's a lot of pressure, I think, in the disability art scene for people like Rachel to be able to not only do what they do as an artist, but also to make sure that everyone knows that they're doing what they do as an artist from them. Because we have this big nothing about us without us policy, which is great, until you get someone like Rachel being pushed towards, can she please do an interview with The Guardian? And you go, she can. But just so you know, in her care review, when interviewed, they said, do you like living at this care home? And she said, I like waving at boys. So yes, she absolutely can be in a Q&A setting, but you might not find out more about the ethical code of the production through her Q&A. That's not the system. If we were doing a Q&A, you'd see that in the show. If that was what was right for Rachel, that's not how she communicates, at least not on the same plane of existence as is expected of her. But with that social media content, we did sit and go, what can Rachel be engaged with? How can we get her voice into this? And the way that we decided was that we would film a day in the life of her as a director, a bit like people do on TikTok or whatever. God, I sound old saying that. And I sat side by side with Rachel and using her own kind of communication model and using a very patient audio voiceover. We share the voiceover for a day in the life where Rachel does quite a lot of call and response language. So I'll say, oh, where are we going to? And she goes, Streatham, we're going to rehearsals. And actually in that way, because we were patient and because we set up recording in a new way, Rachel's voice could be part of it in the way that was appropriate for her and where she would not be misconstrued or where she could be part of telling that story. And just tagging on to what Amy was saying, people want to come and take photos of the desk, but they treat it like it's this kind of golden piece of like untouchable technology, which I think rightly so. It's a really clever piece of tech and it's Rachel's and no one else is allowed to push the buttons on it. But it's really fun like that. Rachel Bagshaw, the AD at the Unicorn and an incredible disabled director, she refers to them as access totems, things where you walk into a room and you can literally see that access is a priority because it is visually present. So you walk into a rehearsal room and there are the beanbags. You walk into a room and the director is using a walking stick and you realise my body is allowed to be vulnerable or have access needs or whatever. On any given day, you walk into a room and someone says, that's the resting area. Okay, I can literally see that rest is valued. And I think the technology in Perfect Show for Rachel is the same. When you put that desk in pride of place on the stage, and when you say Rachel's face and Rachel's words are critical to the design of the show, there's a dramaturgical thing that doesn't need proving in the script or in how we talk about the show. It is just clear, it's visual, it's a reminder that sweat and rigour has gone into putting Rachel's voice there. So I'm really grateful to the technology for doing that, for being that kind of undeniable prioritisation of access in a spatial and visual aesthetic way.
If you could give one tip to another cultural organisation looking to make their work more digitally inclusive, what would it be?
Oh, mine's going to annoy everybody, but people want us to be able to roll out versions of this for every learning disabled person. And the truth is, we have spent, to be candid, hundreds of thousands of pounds and a decade of our life making this show. And it took that level of discovery process to get to what Rachel needs. And then what people would love us to do is to be able to do all of that and fast forward with the next learning disabled person that we work with. And the truth is that the work only gets to be that deep if you are diligent and rigorous. And the work only gets to be that deep from that level of rigour. There are now ripples of impact going into LD care homes and into art settings with learning disabled people in them that definitely have echoes of the show within them, but we're not recreating the show. We don't have a cast of 13 people and a set and a massive bit of technology going in, and I can't drag and drop another learning disabled person into the same directorial role as Rachel. It would look completely different. They might sit somewhere different. They might direct in a completely different format. They might really enjoy chronology in a way that Rachel doesn't. So for us, that discovery mode was critical. And I think at the moment we have a real scarcity mindset about how long artists are allowed to spend working out and innovating around new technology and new ways to make things accessible. The truth is, some of it, the work's already being done. We're not always inventing from scratch, but it did feel like inventing from scratch with Rachel. I said to Lee really early on, and we were a tiny little whippersnapper theatre company doing the Edinburgh Fringe every year at the time, I said, am I cocky to say we can't do this until there's a venue who can really support it? I'm thinking like the Barbican or the Young Vic. I had this wish list of venues who were totally out of our sights at that point in our journey. And he said, no, you're going to have the muscle behind this show to fully support it. And it meant waiting 7 years from the point of the idea to actually being able to produce it. But with various iterations of R&D happening. But oh my God, it was worth it. To wait that long and to put that much resource into slow experimentation. I think we're rushing disabled artists to come up with new tech, where if they were working in a different industry, that development stage would be really cherished and held. So I know that we are all facing extremely tight bottom lines and the feeling of having to move quickly or the feeling of urgency, but definitely the best work that we've done where like we used iPads on a deaf and hearing improv retreat that we ran with Improbable. We took a load of deaf and hearing artists who were interested in improvisation. For various reasons, we needed to be able to relay sign language to people where they could almost see it right in front of them. So we had people wearing iPads and things like that. And that didn't work perfectly. We would need another week or another 2 weeks to really work out, okay, what does that screen-to-screen thing look like when hearing people can be hearing those words? It was a complex piece of improv niche activity that we were doing. It takes time, but once you start that ball rolling, it can infiltrate in so many different aspects of creativity. And that is surely, it's got to be worth doing, I think.
Yeah.
We don't give ourselves enough time around that. And things like developing a whole new app for someone just takes a lot of time.
Something that you've said to me before, Flo, is that it's about making the attitudinal change first. The question makes it feel like you should start with the tools, and it isn't about starting with the tools, it's about starting with the people. So inviting disabled people into the early stages of R&D, making them part of the process from the start, and that leads you to the technologies that you're going to use, just because what the stage of Perfect Show for Rachel looks like is full of all different kinds of technology, creative captioning, the live scribe screens, Rachel on the telly, Rachel's desk. And that doesn't mean that should be the starting point for the next person wanting to make work with disabled people. You start with the people and the technologies become apparent as you work with people.
Yeah, what I hope is that if some creative technician came to see Perfect Show for Rachel, they wouldn't be going, oh, I need to know exactly how the cabling works in that desk. They would be going, I could get given permission and space and resource to treat another idea or another person or collaborator with the same level of experimentation and innovation as Rachel's had. It's really a show that's so specific to Rachel. The whole reason it's called Perfect Show for Rachel is because I had a meltdown at Lee and said, but if I make a show that's perfect for my sister, it will just be Perfect Show for Rachel. And he went, I think you've got your title. But the point is not a prescription model. It's a model that just reminds people that if you are willing to go on that journey of discovery, that is live discovery in the moment, accepting what is really happening, then you can come up with something new that hasn't happened before. I think it hasn't happened before. It doesn't matter if it has. It's about getting there in an authentic way for the artists you're working with. And you have to be working with artists that you think can really make something brilliant and who are really great. We have to start with that respect and dignity in the work that someone might come up with. Lee's calling to imagine that Rachel's words might be poetry and that everything that she says might be perfect already was massive. And for us then going, it's our job now to catch up with her and to find out how to discover those things in a way that we can translate.
And you've got something else, haven't you, for organisations or artists looking to do something in this space?
So we've developed a lot of resource, and lots of that means buying a lot of stuff. Fleur Ruth, our incredible co-founder and creative access director, now manages an access library for London. So we have a store full of things that you might need for a relaxed performance, like breakout space equipment, sensory aids, projectors for captioning, caption units, audio description, headsets, etc., etc., etc. She has this wealth of tech and equipment that we hire out for free to London organisations or artists who want to make their event more accessible. We did that as part of London Borough of Culture, Croydon's Borough of Culture programme, but we are continuing that work, and we really welcome artists who are thinking, how can I make my work more accessible? Oh God, do I have to buy 10 beanbags? Please don't. Please come and borrow it from us. We're based at Stanley Arts in Norwood Junction. And for us, that's part of our commitment to making access not feel like this big expensive thing. You can come and play with some of the technology that we've talked about today and also not hurt the environment so much by buying loads and loads of things that stay in cupboards for most of the year. So please do come and get in touch with us through our website.
That's such a great resource. I'm sure you'll be getting loads of people in touch with you about that. Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been so interesting to learn about Perfect Shade for Rachel and how you've gone through that whole process. If people want to find out more about the show or Zuko as a whole, where do they need to go?
Mainly our handles are at We Are Zuko. So we're at We Are Zuko on Instagram. Our website is wearezuko.co.uk. And I think for LinkedIn, just type in Zuko and hope for the best.
And it's zoo as in animals and co as in company. Depending on how much you love Grease the musical, you might not know that. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much.